It's time for an inside look at the most powerful motorsport on the planet. WFO Radio, NHRA Nitro.
Hey everybody, Joe Castello here. The big go is this week, and we are fired up running through all of our interviews, getting ready for the 65th Chevrolet Performance U.S. Nationals. Fast Jack Beckman is here. We're going to speak with Fast Jack about the 2019 season, winning this race in 2015. We're going to talk about the passing of Bill Doner and get his thoughts and perspective on a switch to quarter-mile drag racing that has been floated out there by so many people. Could it happen? What does he think? All of that stuff. Fast Jack Beckman going to be on the show. His El Camino. All of that stuff coming up. But right now, before we get to the interview, allow me to tell you about the people who make it all possible, like MagicDryUS.com, the official organic absorbent of the National Hot Rod Association. Rodax, CoffeeAndGrills.com, Marvin Rodak, coffee roasted fresh per your order, amazing hot sauces and spice rubs, proprietary stuff that he has made and won awards with. 817-924-6821. That's Marvin Rodak. Samtech.edu, the School of Automotive Machinists and Technology. Start your education at full speed with samtech.edu. Frank Hawley's Drag Racing School, the Dragster Adventure. It makes such a great gift. 866-480-7223. Give the gift of speed with the Dragster Adventure at frankhawley.com. Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology, TotalSeal.com. They'll make them custom for you. And Hangstafers Metalworking Lubricants, Hangstafers Laboratories, since 1937, Hangstafers.com. Fast Jack Beckman won this race in 2015, and we are going to dive in with Jack Beckman, driver of the Infinite Hero, to talk about his thoughts going into NHRA's biggest race. Here we go. Joining us now as we preview the Chevrolet Performance U.S. Nationals, a man who knows exactly what it feels like to park it in the winner's circle. He did it in 2015. Fast Jack Beckman. Jack, welcome back.
I always love talking to you, but I especially like doing it after we win.
Yes, well, maybe the space-time continuum is a little off now, and this is what will help propel you to the winner's circle. A little positive energy, thinking back, reflecting upon your great victory.
Yeah, I'm not superstitious, but at this point, anything's good, right, Joe?
There you go. Well, what about that? I got a lot of things I want to talk to you about. Right before I clicked record, everybody, Jack says, you don't even have to prep me for anything. So I have created a calculus question that I'm going to present to you, Jack.
I'll get my son. He's 12 and he's good at it.
But really, last week at the race, we had a conversation about the passing of Bill Doner, which is what was the genesis of, Jack's a good person to have on the show this week because, number one, we can talk about the history of drag racing in California where there are few people, I'm sure you know who they are, that know more and certainly appreciate more than the way you do and can speak better at least of the culture that was created by all of those tracks. But then also the fact that we're going to the U.S. Nationals, the fact that you're in the countdown, but you have yet to win a race. But I don't know. I don't feel like that's reflective of the team just yet. I feel like you're a team that you could win 2 or 3 in a row at any point if the breaks go your way.
Sure. Yeah. Height beat me on a hole shot in the finals at Pomona, and I think I drove well, and he drove better. I didn't do a bad job. He just did a better job. Chicago, I think, probably was going to be our race, and I red-lit in the semifinals. And then we've been to 2 other final rounds, and we just didn't get the job done. So we have a car that's consistent. We have a car that's quick. We were low ET of the meet in Brainerd. We just got to make it consistently quick. In other words, we come back for round 2. The track got warmer. We softened it up, and it slowed down 200ths more than we thought it was going to slow down. And the Napa car just flat out ran us. But I don't think there's anybody on our team that doesn't believe we could go out there and win 2 or 3 in a row. The issue is, especially when you get late in this year and you haven't won, you don't want to get that sense of desperation. If a football team's down by 14 points with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, they literally change their tactics, and it's kind of an all-or-nothing approach. We don't need to do that. We just need to keep plugging away like we're doing, and the one thing you can't control is racing luck. And this year, I don't know that we've benefited from any, or certainly not much of it. In years past, that pendulum always swings back and forth. So I think we keep picking away at the data. John and Guido keep making good calls. I need to drive consistently well out there. And at the end of the day, you say, okay, there's 7 opportunities left to get a trophy, and we'd certainly like to do it more than once.
Absolutely. And it's the second season, whatever you want to call it. I've been making the case for a long time about why I'm interested in the countdown, and I think it's good. I know there are always people that will push back against me. Steve Torrence is one of them, and I respect it. But in the end, this is the system that we have, and you're going to gain a lot of points, right? Everybody is going to gain a lot of points. We're going to restart again. Not quite tied, but practically tied. And you got to put together 6 races. But really, though, Jack, none of that matters because you're sitting 5th in the points and you're trying to win the U.S. Nationals like you did in 2015. But what I think is interesting is that in 2015, you won the U.S. Nationals over Robert Hight, but you had Jimmy Prock. And I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. Most of the Hall of Fames are filled with the contestants. So drag racing, most of the members in the Hall of Fame are drivers, but they're also starting to get recognized for the team owners, for the crew chiefs, and for other positions. And I think that this will probably dovetail into our donor conversation later. But there's no doubt Jimmy Prock is a future Hall of Famer. What he's did in his career is he's just an incredibly smart individual, and so is Chris Cunningham. And I've seen their brilliance firsthand. I got to sit behind their tune-up for a couple of years, and it was a wonderful thing. But the great thing right now, especially in funny car, I mean, what the Torrances are doing in Top Fuel is I'm not saying it's unprecedented, but it's just unnerving how much better they've been than everybody else the last 3 years. But in funny car, man, the parody's amazing. And I mentioned earlier how that pendulum swings back and forth. Nobody has a 24-race season where everything goes well. Everybody has highs and lows and peaks and valleys. And it's what really keeps it exciting. And though I think that there's a better way to do the countdown, in essence, you're waving a yellow flag in NASCAR, and you're going to tighten up the field. And so what's going to happen is you better hope there's a lot more peaks than valleys in that last 6 races of the countdown.
Well, I do not disagree that anything can be improved. And so, the concept that we're on, I am always open to restructuring and improving. And my, since we're on this, in my concept, you would reward someone who has 8 wins more than someone with 2 wins, right? Like, so what you did in the regular season directly translates. And if you're like Steve Torrence, you've built up a huge lead. You'd really have to stink badly for the last 6 races to figure out how to lose it. But that's for the rules makers to decide. But yeah, I'm open for tweaking and improving and focusing on new ways to make it exciting. Now, did that 2015 U.S. Nationals victory, did it change your life? The way we always say. Of course, there's the prefix U.S. Nationals winner, but you've experienced it. We always say it, right? Like, if once you win this race, I've been saying it all year long about Terry McMillan, it just fundamentally changes the way you are viewed in the drag racing community. You have got a stat that everybody wants. Did that happen for you?
Yeah, but listen, I don't think Ron Capps is going to be denied entry into the Hall of Fame if he never wins Indy. I mean, you look at that guy, he's had an unbelievable career, and honest to God, if you truly sat down with Ron and asked him, I don't think it'd be a huge deal to him that he hasn't won Indy. It's like asking a single person if they miss having children. It's like, I just don't understand the concept of that. I was born and raised in Southern California. To me, the Winter Nationals is the biggest race of the year. So the first time I went to Indy and spectated, I started to wrap my head around how big it is. I'd been to I think I'd run it up there twice before. I'd won the shootout there a couple of times. But you really don't realize how big it is until maybe the week after that you've won the race. So, yeah, it was huge for me. But when I won the race, I'm a mature adult. I'm not 20 years old. I'm married. I have kids. it ain't life-changing, Joe. It's an incredibly bitchin' feeling, and it's cool. And it's a nice stat to hear when somebody's talking about you, but I don't get up in the morning and say, damn straight we won Indy. But at the end of the day, as an athlete, as a competitor, I should say, I mean, I want to win Phoenix. I want to win Atlanta. But when I go look at my trophies in the office, the Indy one's got a special shine to it. There's no doubt about that.
I can imagine that. All right, let's get to the conversation we initially got on the topic of. Drag racing lost one of its great promoters, Bill Donor, who, as I found out more and more about him, I would call it like 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, as I began to expand my drag racing knowledge. And frankly, Steve Evans' Be There tape/CD of old drag racing commercials really did a good job of explaining, like, the concept of this ad, and this is what we were trying to go for, and here's the result. And the radio talk show host side of me found that to be very interesting, because that is another avenue of interest to me. And they merged, right? And that this guy, and so then I watched the Bill Donor roast. I paid for that, and I thought, this guy is like a he's one of those like Paul Bunyan story type characters that really has a lot to do with the success of what we're doing now, whether or not people realize it.
Yeah, and even as recently as just a few years ago, he was the head of an organization for the nostalgia funny cars to get them booked in. So for the fans who don't know, Bill Donor was a promoter, and maybe it's fair to say Bill Donor was the promoter when it comes to drag racing. That's no knock on the Bandemirs, that's no knock on the Baders. They've done phenomenal jobs at a single facility. Bill Donor did a phenomenal job on an entire coast. I was talking to him at Seattle, and he told me at one time he was managing 9 drag strips back in the day. And, him and Steve Evans were partners in crime, and I mean that in a sarcastic way, not a literal way. And I've heard Bill referred to as a hustler several times. And at first, it makes you kind of wince when you hear somebody being called a hustler. But the more I think about it, I think I understand it. There's a few different types of hustlers. The bad type is the type that does stuff because they only care that they benefit from it. The good type of hustler wants everybody to win. And I think Donor was that guy. I think when he put on an event, he wanted the fans to win. He wanted a show that was phenomenal, whether it was a wet T-shirt contest or motorcycles with hang gliders strapped to the top of them jumping, or 64 funny cars. That guy knew how to throw a party at a drag strip. He wanted the racers to win. When he'd book in a match race with 8 funny cars, he wanted those guys to get a good paycheck at the end of the day. Ed McCulloch and I were talking years ago, and I had just met Donor. I mean, I knew who he was, but I had just become closer to him, and I was asking McCulloch about him. And Ed said, people can say whatever they want. Bill always honored his promises. He says, I went to a race once where the gate was terrible. It was bad weather or whatever, and just not that many people showed up. And he said, Donor got us all together, and he said, guys, I can't pay you what I promised you, but I promise you I will make it up at the next opportunity. And Ed said he absolutely did. He made all of us whole again, and he made us all a lot of money by booking them in. So Donor made it so that the fans won, the racers won, and the racetrack won. If you could put on a great show, you could leave with a lot of money, and he did that a lot of times. And I think the proof is he was good over several decades. He didn't come in, make a couple killings, then lose his butt and have to go somewhere else. He was good enough at it for a long enough period of time that he was able to make a good living.
The concept of managing 9 tracks, period, is shocking. Doing it without computers and without cell phones, and it just seems alien and impossible. No internet, but they did it. By the way, Ed McCulloch has got a great view of Bill Donor because he's the guy who got to win the big prize.
Well, are you referring to the lady with the initials of LL?
Yes, I am.
Well, but there's more to the story than that. So for the fans that are middle-aged, Linda Lovelace starred in adult films back in the day, and Donor had as the winner's prize, in addition to cash, a date with Linda Lovelace, and McCulloch won the race, and he went on a date with Linda Lovelace, and her boyfriend came along. So it wasn't the experience that most people would talk it up to be, but Donor delivered as promised.
Wow, I think you're throwing cold water on a great story right there. My imagination says that still amazing things could potentially have happened. Now, Orange County International Raceway, the flagship, right? And it's a shame that, we've lost Steve Evans several, years back. And Donor was out at Seattle, and I had a conversation with him. And he's the kind of character that I had spoken with a few times, and we had nice pleasantries, and I paid my respects. But, man, I really would have loved to have sat down and peppered him with questions, right? Like all kinds of questions. And now he's passed away, just like that a couple weeks later. In fact...
Yeah, and...
Go ahead.
Phil Burgess lament.
Yes,
Phil
I
Burgess,
just read it.
Yeah, but Phil's the National Dragster editor, and he lamented on the same thing. He said, "God, Bill and I had an unset date to sit down, and I wanted to hear where the bodies were buried." And he said, "I'm never going to have that chance now." I always say, for you to be a good storyteller, you either have to be a great talker with an okay story, an okay talker with a great story, or a good talker with a good story. Bill Donor was a great talker with 150,000 great stories.
Amazing. And it's such a shame.
Well, you keep mentioning Steve Evans, and to come full circle on this, you're talking about how does a guy manage so many tracks simultaneously, and I think Donor would tell you he surrounded himself with good people. He had Steve Evans as his right arm out there, managing Orange County, one time managing Lions when it closed. So I think Donor truly had a cast of characters out there that kind of fit the mold. Let's put on a show larger than life, and all of us can come out of here making some money. The fans are going to love us, and the racers are going to love us.
And because of that, I think of so many people that are involved in drag racing and were affected by drag racing, those spectacular shows, craziness. Now, I come around many years after all this is over, and West Coast drag racing is very different than East Coast drag racing. Don't get me wrong, there was crazy stuff. But the things that we heard of, in fact, on the starting line out there in Seattle, speaking with John Force, he recounted the story of, streakers was a big part of it. You'd do your burnout, and here they would come, man, streaking past you on the track like an eighth mile out as you're trying to back up. And he said to me flat out, he goes, I always suspected Donor of paying those people to do that.
Well, the first race I ever went to was 73, and I think I was privy to one streaker, and I'm thinking, God, people always refer to the 60s, but that era and the pharmacological effects definitely tapered off slowly into the mid-70s.
Yes, well...
You got to remember this. This was back in the days of push start in the top fuel cars. The funny cars all did dry hops. I mean, it was truly a spectacle there. This was long before the Me Too movement. All these big one-off events they'd call them a fox hunt, which was a glorified bikini contest, or wet T-shirt contest. I mean, they would just do stuff that there was just no way you could get away with it today.
Yeah, well, certainly not in the family-friendly atmosphere of Major League Sports. Definitely not. There are places this stuff goes down, but not right alongside of Major League Sports. It's very, very, it's a new world. It's a different world. In many ways, a better world, but there are some things that were pretty spectacular. And that's what I think about drag racing all the time, Jack, is that, TV was terrible then. The pictures were horrible. There were no shows on. There was really, there were things to do, but not really that great. And when you put drag racing, these amazing machines and people and characters and crazy paint schemes with characters on them and fire coming out of cars, it's no wonder so many people fell in love with this sport compared to what was going on right alongside of it and your other choices. You could go to a field and watch some guys, run around and chase each other. Not as cool. Sorry, I love sports, but not as cool.
I often wonder, because a lot of times your fondness for something has as much to do with your brain development as it does with whatever the something is. In other words, a 7-year-old's recollections of things are going to be significantly different than their fondness for something when they're 15, than their fondness for something when they're 35, and so on. So, to me, going to my first drag race at 7, it struck a chord and it struck it hard. And I often wonder, and I think the answer is an affirmative, that a 7-year-old today coming to a drag race, I'll always get kids to help me pack the parachutes. So if you talk to one of those kids 30 years from now, and you're interviewing them and they were a driver, are they going to say, man, I remember when I went and you could walk up to the pits and I helped Beckman pack his chutes and that car went out there and won the next round? So I think that in our own way, we're doing the same thing for today's generation. It just was so different back then. There were metal flake and candy paint jobs. All the cars had names on them. It was in the day where 2 or 3 guys could field a fairly competitive car, so they didn't have to have sponsor decals covering the entire thing. And, like I said, you push-started them. On the last beat of the national anthem, these top fuel cars are coming down the fire-up road. The funny cars would do a burnout backup. The crew chief would pour a little VHT in front of the rear tires. They'd do these dry hops up to the starting line. It was amazing. The runs themselves were almost the icing on the cake. It was all this stuff that went up to the time when the Christmas tree got activated and the cars took off.
Oh, that makes total sense. I really appreciate your comment about the kids today. It's something that I say all the time when combating people on the Facebook who are saying things used to be better way back in the day. One thing people way back in the day did not have to deal with was people on Facebook running it down in any way, shape, or form. It just was what it was, and you either liked it and enjoyed it and went and participated, or you didn't, and there was no real channel to try to propagate information about why you don't like it and what's wrong with it and all of that.
No,
that's modern.
It's easy to be a hater. And listen, I wax fondly about drag racing 40 years ago. But that's because I was 10 years old then. As a 10-year-old, everybody's 8 feet tall that gets out of one of these cars. Your perspective on life is very different at 10 versus at 53. So do I think some of it was better back then? Hell yes. Do I think some of it's better today? Without question.
What are some of the things like donorisms, philosophies, things that maybe could be or should be or already are being instituted? I think of our Friday night primetime thing that we got going on. Some tracks, we got pyrotechnics.
Donor and I had a great conversation because Seattle, the crowd Saturday was awesome. The crowd Sunday was good. The crowd Friday was horrible. And many times the weather affects the crowd, and not necessarily the weather, but the weather forecast. If the weatherman says on Wednesday, Friday's a 90% chance of rain, a lot of walk-up ticket purchasers don't come to the race. And if it doesn't rain, guess what? The race goes on without people there. I thought the Friday show at Seattle was a great show in front of very few spectators. Donor and I got to talking about this, and he says, Jack, he said, in all my years, I never figured out how to get a Friday night crowd. He said, I did one of my 32-car funny car shows. It was a Friday-Saturday deal. He said, I gave free admission on Friday. He said, I figured I'd make the money on parking, on concessions, on merchandising. He said, I let him in for free. I promoted the heck out of it. He said, I couldn't get anybody to show up. He says, Friday nights are just notoriously difficult to get people out there. But I love the fact that Bill Donor was smart enough to realize sometimes you can give stuff away to make money.
Yes, well, that is true. It all depends on what you're doing. And people have worked all week. They've been at their job. They're beaten down. They're exhausted. And now they got to come home and change and go somewhere. I can understand it, which is why we just got to convince them to call in sick on Friday.
Well, yeah. I always tell people when I was an elevator man for 10 years, I never took a sick day. And every vacation day I had was spent at a drag strip. It was before I was a racer, it was Friday at Pomona. I'd even take off Thursday, and that's when they had one pro session on Thursday. And when I was a racer, every one of them, every vacation day, was me in the pits working on my car.
Yeah, that is awesome, and I love that aspect about you. All right, let's shift gears, a couple other things. The quarter mile talk, Jack. I'm asking everybody that I respect on this show whenever we get them on, the quarter mile talk. It's continuing on. The drum is beating. It's beating louder. Things are happening. Where's your head at on this?
Well, I think I'm going to have to take a different approach on this because I can think of a million reasons why it won't work. I can think of a bunch of reasons why 1,000 Foot fixed a lot of things, even though I'm an absolute purist and would love to go quarter mile. So let me take the other side of it. We're going to go quarter mile. Let's get the best minds together, and let's figure out how do we do this. So in a perfect world, we're going to have to slow these cars way down because you can't have them running over 340. Goodyear's not going to be happy with that. You don't want them sitting on the rev limiter forever to keep that speed down. We're just going to blow stuff up. And the cars weigh 185 pounds more than they weighed the last time we ran the quarter mile, so slowing them down at speed is already going to be more difficult. So let's say your target speed for the quarter mile is 305. Now let's figure out how we get there. So you build a combination that goes 295 to 305 miles an hour. You know the crew chiefs are going to pick away at it and make it faster. So you have to have built in the ability to add a couple ways to slow them down in the future after that. So is that combination going to be cutting our fuel pump in half from 110 gallon a minute pumps down to 50 or 55? You say, okay, that's a good way to get there. Well, guess what? Now we don't need the camshafts, the big cylinder heads, or the high-efficiency superchargers that we have right now because you just cut the fuel flow in half. Ooh, okay, so how many of the parts that we now have are literally obsolete overnight? So you say, well, we can't do any of that. Well, maybe we have to do some of that. And I think that that's the problem with the current Pro Stock cars is they let them run wild in 1982. They said, you guys are going to 500 cubic inches and you're going to 2,350 pounds, have at it. And for a decade and a half, they were phenomenal because they were the most bitchin' door cars out there. Now, they didn't really look like anything that they were in 1970 when Pro Stock became the factory hot rods. It was the deal where the factories would get involved because the cars looked so similar to the showroom models that people could identify with the brands. Well, now Pro Stock morphs clear out into right field, but it was still cool until Pro Mod came out. Now you got a door car that's even cooler and even faster, and I think that that's been responsible for a lot of decline in Pro Stock. So my point being is maybe in 1982 when NHRA made these rules changes to Pro Stock, they should have said, okay, guys, just keep in mind in 1990, we're going to go to 350 cubic inches, fuel injection, and no wheelie bars or short wheelie bars or whatever. And then the racers would know we can refine and develop all this technology, but at some point that stuff's going to be obsolete and it's going to be boat anchors. So now with the fuel categories, if you make these major horsepower reductions, you're going to end up with a lot of inventory that's obsolete. Oh, boy. Now, that's a bitter pill to swallow, even for the Force, Coletta, and Schumacher teams to have to sell all that stuff to tractor guys for 30 cents on the dollar. But then what do you do about the Del Worsham, who's got his own dragster and funny car that he leases out to make money? What do you do about Terry Haddock, who's got one of each? You know, what do you do about these independent guys that even though they're buying secondhand parts most of the time, they've taken 5 years to acquire a war chest of inventory that now is going to be obsolete. So it's going to be a lot of seriously tough decisions to try to figure out how do we do this. You know, Prudhomme advocated just pull one mag out of the car, which sounds like a brilliant way to try to get the crew chiefs to figure out how do you do this with half the ignition volume. The potential downside to that is you're going to see a tremendous number of runs where one car doesn't get down the racetrack because the crew chiefs are pushing the edge and it just doesn't fire the fuel. So there's going to be unintended consequences no matter how they decide to go about this. And I guess at the end of the day, I'm on board for whatever. But like I tell the fans who get mad at NHRA and everybody else, I said, look, if you're going to get mad at somebody, get mad at the crew chiefs. They're the brilliant rocket scientists who figured out how to make these cars 30 miles an hour faster in the last 15 years. And you're just reaching a point where we don't have tire technology to keep up with it. We don't have shutdown area to keep up with it. So we had to make some concessions. So do we stay at 1,000 foot? And we've already limited the cars at 1,000 foot. So they're going to run 335 miles an hour on the rev limiters. Or do we go back to the quarter mile and slow the cars down 30 miles an hour? You're never going to have the old days of Tony Schumacher running 337. I own the quarter mile speed record at 333. Well, Height's already gone 6 mile an hour faster at 1,000 foot. If we go back to the quarter mile, nobody's ever going to come close to my 333.
Interesting to hear you lay it out like that. I've said I'm down for whatever, right? Like, what am I going to do? I'm down for whatever. I'm just interested to see how they work the deal.
The two goofy things about 1,000 foot. Initially, it was the numbers don't add up to the people in the stands. So you're used to seeing a top field dragster. A good run was 4.49 seconds, 335 miles an hour. Then we go to 1,000 foot, and all of a sudden you see 3.90 seconds at 318 miles an hour. And the numbers just didn't make sense. Well, now that we've done this for 11 years, the 1,000 foot numbers make sense. The other goofy thing was you have two different finish lines. You keep having to put the blocks up for 12:54 and 13:20 when the non-nitro cars run, and then take them down when Top Fuel and Funny Car come up. It's a little bit odd to have two different finish lines, but it seemed to have worked well. The people that are really offended by it, and I totally understand it, are the people in their late 50s to mid-80s who grew up on quarter-mile racing, and I get it. But again, if you're going to hate on somebody, hate on these brilliant crew chiefs. They're the ones that have taken these box of parts that they're allowed to run and made them work so well that these cars run speeds that nobody ever could have dreamed of.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out. The Chevrolet Performance U.S. Nationals are this week. Next year is when they will tackle all that quarter-mile stuff, potentially. This year will be run to 1,000 foot, and it's going to be very exciting. Now, you had one bit of good news that you shared with me at the beginning of the show. Is that for public consumption?
Sure.
What is it?
Yeah. My first car, the car I took my driver's license test on my 16th birthday, June 28th, 1982, is a 68 SS396 El Camino. My dad bought it in 79 from the original owner. I bought it from my dad when I was 15, and it was the first car I took down a drag strip. It was when I was in the Air Force. I drove it out to Lubbock, Texas. I still have my first time slip from that car. It's the car I won my first drag race in, and I just got tremendous amount of memories in that car, going to the drive-in movies with my buddies, and then it sat for 22 years. And it was a 3-year restoration project. I got radically carried away. I blame my buddy Joe Pando at MSD. He gave me a fuel injection unit for the thing 2 years before I ever started restoring it. And then when I started on the restoration project, the first guy I met was John Hotchkiss, and he said, I'll give you all the suspension stuff if you let us come over and film the installation here. So I got all this great stuff for the car, and the build quality just went up dramatically. So fast forward 38 months later, I get the car running, and people keep asking, what are you doing this for? Are you going to autocross it? You're going to drag race it? I said, no, I want to cruise it to Bob's Big Boy. That's the entire reason I built this car. I drove it 70 miles out to Burbank to Bob's Big Boy on my birthday, June 28th, sat down and had dinner with Tommy Ivo. Some of my school buddies came out. My uncle came out. And a gentleman came out who I tracked down through the internet, and I got a picture of him sitting in the car, and the first time he sat in that car was 51 years and 1 day before that. I tracked down the original owner. So yesterday, I took the car down to El Segundo, and it got the Hot Rod Magazine photo shoot. So the car's going to be in Hot Rod sometime next year.
Wow, that is great. And I'm on your page looking at some of the shots that you posted. And the car came out great, Jack. Good job. That is like... That right there is the, American graffiti hot rodder dream, to be able to stay connected to something that was so important to you in your early life and take it and evolve it and improve it and still enjoy it later in life, and then to be recognized the way you did. I think you've done a great job with this thing. I like the wheels you selected. This is my first time seeing it. Good job.
That is 4,000 pounds worth of memories. So next on the agenda for that, my buddy Jimmy G did the Turbo 400 for this at Racetrans, and the long-term goal has always been to put an overdrive tranny and lockup converter in it. So before we did that, I told him, I said, let's try to do this so the people that gave us the parts for the transmission can get some love. We'll try to get a magazine to do this, but first I need to get mileage, and I need to get quarter-mile data on the thing. So it got 10.5 miles to the gallon on my loop to Bob's Big Boy and back, and then I took it to Fontana. It was 96 degrees out on street tires, kind of had to baby it out of the hole, and the thing went 1299, 105. You say, okay, now I've got a baseline. I thought it would run quicker till I weighed the car. It was 4,205 pounds with me in it. What a tank. So now we'll put the overdrive in it with the lockup converter, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get performance data, and I'm going to get mileage data, and I am just going to enjoy the heck out of cruising that thing. It's going to be maybe a once or twice a month car, but I've already taken it to the NHRA Museum for their Wednesday cruise nights, and it's fun. It's fun to hang out and talk to other people who were dumb enough to waste 3 or 4 or 10 years of their life and tens of thousands of dollars to make their car look cooler so they can go park in the parking lot next to your car.
Yeah, it's a support group of crazy people, but I love them.
It's our therapy because it's not rehab.
No, definitely not. Jack, good luck in the biggest race of the year, the biggest race on the planet, the Chevrolet Performance U.S. Nationals. I wish you good luck in the countdown as well. Thank you for coming on to talk a little bit about Bill Donor. And wherever the conversation goes, that's usually the way it is when you come on the show, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't. I'm looking forward to seeing you again, and rest in peace, Mr. Donor. That guy had a big effect on a lot of our lives. He absolutely will be missed.
Absolutely. Jack, thank you so much.
Take care, Joe.
Thank you, Jack. Fast Jack Beckman with us here on WFO Radio, NHRA Nitro, driver for Don Schumacher Racing. Quick reminder, Friday, August 30th, Friday, they've got the big Don Schumacher Racing open house. Doors open 10 a.m. from 1 to 1:15 will be the DSR driver autograph session. There's going to be a huge car show. You get to see the inside of Don Schumacher Racing. But most importantly, the proceeds go to the kids at the Riley Children's Foundation. Mike Lewis doing a great job over the years. Riley Children's Foundation will be the recipient of the proceeds for the 2019 DSR Open House Car and Bike Show. That is Friday. If you're planning to be in Indy, you definitely want to go to that. So Fast Jack with us here on WFO. We have got more to come, but let me tell you, the Bill Donor situation, it hits home because we just saw him in Seattle. He was out there, and there were a couple of times that I thought to myself, I should go talk to him, and I did not. And I regret it now, obviously. The Phil Burgess story on NHRA.com is thorough. You've got to go check it out. It is absolutely excellent. I did have a conversation with Donor, just super brief, and I'm happy that I did do that as well. And to think, I found out as a legend, he is just a legend to me. An East Coast kid, southeastern United States, gets the Steve Evans Be There tape and listen about drag racing commercials from the West Coast and all of that, and you learn about him. Like, oh, who was this guy? What did he do? He was a promoter. Who was he? Then you dig deep and you do the research and the roast DVD and all of those things. Amazing. And thinking about the people who actually lived it. The 64 funny cars, OCIR, all of that stuff. Thanks to Fast Jack. Good luck at the big go. And I love the quarter mile talk, too. Like, are we going back to quarter mile? Is that really a thing? Are we doing that? And that's the discussion, and we will cover it all over the place on WFO Radio. Subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. You can go to WFOradio.com, and that will be a nice little map. SoundCloud. We have our own WFO Radio mobile app as well, and we have got more interviews getting ready to roll out. It is Indy Week, and so you do not want to miss a show. Stay connected on the WFO Radio Twitter and Facebook, and you will not miss them. For instance, we have got the star of Roadkill. They got 100 episodes. He's hanging out at the NHRA on a regular basis, getting ready for Drag Week. We're going to have Drag Week cars at the Big Go. Freiburger going to be on WFO Radio, and I'm going to put him through the full WFO Radio treatment. Like, how did you get here? What did you do? What happened at that point? And I want to know, Drag Week, where did that come from?
We sat around in the hot rod office and said, man, this is the thing, but who really has the fastest street car in America? And I actually said, well, there's only one way to find that out, is to actually have a race.
There's only one way to find that out, is to actually have a race. You're going to love the interview. Stay tuned. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Never miss a show. Big thanks to our sponsors, of course, Total Seal, Frank Hawley's, Samtech.edu, Rodax Coffee and Grills.com, MagicDryUS.com, Hanks the First, Metalworking Lubricants, Hussey Performance, everybody who supports us, Drag Racing Edge Magazine. We've got great guests. We've got more interviews. Stay tuned. It's Indy Week on WFO.
WFO! The views and opinions of the hosts, guests, or callers do not necessarily reflect that of the station ownership, advertisers, or agencies.
I love WFO Radio.
Oh, yeah.
You're working in the shop, you've got spills, you've spilled oil, it's everywhere. What are you going to do? I know what you're going to do, but that's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to go to magicdryus.com and order the official organic absorbent of the National Hot Rod Association, Magic Dry. It's lighter, it absorbs more, it's better for the environment. It's made out of coconut. It's made in America. magicdryus.com. They've got spill kits that include everything you need for a regular, normal household spill, all the way up to a large industrial spill. We always say, if you've got a cat, get Cat Spot. If you've got a shop, if you've got a factory, if you've got a spill, call Magic Dry. That's magicdryus.com. Attention adrenaline junkies, Frank Hawley's Dragster Adventure is calling you. Rides available for the 2020 season. Go to frankhawley.com. They're coming to a track near you. It makes a great gift, and you know the holidays are coming, whether it be licensing for super comp, super gas, all the way up to top alcohol, they can do it. But if you're a drag racing fan and you've always imagined what it might be like to drive a dragster, to accelerate 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and run 10s in the quarter mile, give them a call. 866-480-7223, frankhawley.com, the Dragster Adventure, and tell them you heard it on WFO.
Subscribe to WFO Radio on iTunes. Never miss a show. And don't forget to write a review. WFO.
This is WFO Radio.